This is your need to know. This is your need to know.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into a really wild idea. What if the electrical fields in our brains are actually shaping how our brains work?
It really flips the script on how we usually think about the brain, right? We're so focused on those neurons and synapses.
Totally. It's like we've been looking at each individual instrument in an orchestra, but totally missing the conductor who's really running the show.
And that conductor is the electrical field. We've got these 3 studies here, one from Neuron, one from the Journal of Physiology, and one from PLOS Computational Biology.
Okay, so each one is looking at this electrical side of the brain, but from a different angle.
Yeah, exactly. They're all looking at different aspects, but they come together to paint this bigger picture of how these electrical fields might be this hidden communication pathway in the brain.
Okay, I'm so curious. So what's the common thread between these studies? What's the mission for our deep dive today?
Well, the big question is, how are these electrical fields allowing different parts of the brain to talk to each other, especially when the normal connections, the synapses, aren't involved?
Okay, that is fascinating. So let's start with that Neuron article. It talks about how different types of brain cells actually react in unique ways to electrical stimulation.
Yeah, and this is a huge finding. It's kind of like realizing that different instruments in the orchestra are actually tuned to respond to different frequencies.
Oh, I like that analogy.
So they found that excitatory neurons, the ones that amp up the activity in other neurons, are way more sensitive to a wider range of electrical frequencies compared to inhibitory neurons, the ones that kind of dampen things down.
So it's not just like a blanket electrical field that's baiting all the neurons equally. It's more like there's this nuanced and selective kind of influence going on.
Precisely. And the really cool thing is that this selectivity comes down to the specific types of ion channels that each neuron type has.
Okay, hold on. Just a super quick reminder for our listeners. What are those ion channels again?
So basically, imagine tiny little gates on the surface of neurons that control the flow of these charged particles, ions, in and out of the cell.
Like little doorways.
Yeah, exactly. And this flow of charged particles is basically what creates the electrical signals in the brain.
Oh, okay. So each type of neuron has its own unique set of these gates that make it either more or less responsive to different electrical frequencies.
Exactly. And the study found this pattern was the same across different brain regions and even across different species.
Whoa. So it's not just some random thing. This is a pretty fundamental principle then, how neurons interact with these electrical fields.
It seems that way, yeah.
This is where I start to see how this connects to that second study, the one from the Journal of Physiology. They found that some brain activity can actually travel without using those synapses at all.
It's like a message being passed through a crowd without anyone actually whispering to each other.
Yeah. They looked at this slow periodic activity in the hippocampus, which is a brain area that's super important for memory.
Right. And even when they blocked the normal way that neurons communicate, the chemical signals between them, this slow rhythmic activity was still spreading.
So if it's not going through the synapses, then how is it traveling? Is this where that ephaptic coupling thing comes in?
Bingo. Ephaptic coupling is this really cool concept where the electrical fields generated by the neurons themselves can actually directly influence the activity of nearby neurons, even without a physical connection between them.
Oh, so it's not like a direct one-to-one phone call. It's more like a broadcast signal that other neurons can pick up on if they're tuned to the right frequency.
You got it. And the Journal of Physiology study gives us some solid evidence that this type of ephaptic communication is actually happening in the brain, at least for certain kinds of brain activity.
And now this brings us to that third study, the one from PLOS Computational Biology. And they took this idea of ephaptic coupling and really explored what it could mean for things like thinking and aging.
What's really cool about this PLOS study is that they didn't just talk about ephaptic coupling theoretically, they actually came up with a way to measure it.
So they could see which parts of the brain are more prone to this kind of electrical crosstalk.
You got it. And they came up with this measurement called EMO-D1. It takes into account how the brain is physically structured. I mean, the brain isn't just the smooth surface, right? It's got all these folds and grooves.
Like a walnut.
Yeah. Exactly. And they found that the closer those folds are to each other, the stronger the electrical fields are likely to be in those areas.
So like those tightly packed crowds again, right?
Yeah.
If everyone is shouting, the message is going to spread way easier, even if they're not talking to each other directly.
Exactly. And the fascinating thing is they found that this potential for ephaptic coupling, it changes a lot across different brain regions.
So some parts of the brain are just electrically chattier than others.
Precisely. And the areas where this ephaptic coupling seems to be strongest, well, those tend to be the areas that are involved in like higher level cognitive functions. Things like decision-making and planning. Which makes you wonder.
If that's why those functions are more likely to decline as we get older. Because the PLOS study also found that this potential for ephaptic coupling, it actually decreases as we age.
That's the big question. Is it the decline in ephaptic coupling that's causing the age-related cognitive decline, or is it the other way around? We definitely need more research to figure that out.
Yeah, but just the possibility is wild. It's like this whole other layer of how our brains work and how they change over time.
Right. And it all comes back to those ion channels we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. That neuron study showed how different neuron types are sensitive to different electrical fields based on their ion channels.
Exactly. And if that's the case, then the electrical fields created by one type of neuron could be specifically influencing the activity of other neurons that have similar ion channels, similar tuning.
So we're not just talking about random electrical noise here. This could be meaningful information that's shaping how different parts of the brain talk to each other.
It's like realizing that those whispers in a crowd, they aren't just random. They're actually carrying these coded messages that only certain people can understand. So we've got this idea that different neurons respond to electrical fields based on their ion channels. We've got evidence that brain activity can travel without synapses, possibly through this ephaptic coupling. And we know that the potential for this ephaptic coupling varies throughout the brain and decreases with age. What does it all mean? It's pointing to something much bigger. Like, brain communication is way more complex and dynamic than we thought.
We can't just focus on those synapses anymore.
Right. We need to start thinking of the brain as this whole electrical system where the fields, the frequencies, and even the ion channels are all working together to control the flow of information.
Wow. This is blowing my mind. It's like we found this hidden language of the brain, and we're just beginning to crack the code.
Exactly. Imagine what we could do if we could actually speak this language. If we could manipulate these electrical fields, we might be able to treat brain disorders in a totally new way.
Like instead of just boosting or blocking certain neurotransmitters, we could target specific circuits and frequencies. Almost like fine-tuning a radio to get the exact signal we want.
Right. And who knows, maybe we could even enhance cognitive function. We could slow down age-related decline or even boost learning and memory.
This is revolutionary, changes how we think about the brain and what it can do. So to bring it all back to those 3 studies, what are some of the key takeaways? And what new questions do they raise?
This is your need to know. I am impossible. I am responsible. I've been going in the dark, yeah, lost in the spark. Lines of logic breaking down, making their mark. Zeros and ones in a loop, I'm stuck in the grind. Syntax hell in my heart, I'm losing my mind. Circuits crash and feel the burn. What's the lesson I can learn? Electric pulses out of tune, glitching out beneath the moon. Glitch my code and unload, ready to spin. Lost in the data, just let the glitch begin. Unwired, rewired, so certain lives again. Calling the fusion, no one leaves the same. The system overload, beyond the buzz. Machine is so twisted, breaking because I hit batteries, go mad, no stop in sight. Rent a couple of you back. This is your need to know.
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways here is that we really need to think more broadly about how the brain communicates. For so long, everyone has been laser focused on synapses, those tiny connections between neurons.
Yeah, those are super important, but these studies are showing us that there's this whole other level of communication happening at the same time.
It's like we've been so focused on the individual letters that we've missed the entire story written on the page.
Exactly. The neuron study shows us that the different types of neurons, they have these unique sensitivities to the electrical fields, almost like they each have their own frequency. And then the Journal of Physiology study, it shows us that this sensitivity might actually let neurons communicate without even using synapses.
Yeah, remember that slow rhythmic activity they saw in the hippocampus? It kept spreading even when they blocked the normal synaptic connections. That's a pretty strong sign that ephaptic coupling is at work.
And then the PLOS computational biology study takes things even further by actually giving us a way to measure this ephaptic coupling. We can see where in the brain it's strongest and how it changes over time.
And that opens up a whole new world of research. I mean, if this kind of communication is really that important for those higher level cognitive functions, could we find a way to actually boost it? Could we help aging brains by targeting ephaptic coupling?
It's almost like figuring out how to amplify a weak signal, right? If we could strengthen those electrical connections, it could be a game changer for treating cognitive decline.
And maybe not just treating decline, but even improving cognitive function in healthy people. Like, what if we could actually make learning and memory better by tweaking those electrical fields?
The possibilities are incredible. But I think it's important to remember that we're still just scratching the surface when it comes to understanding this electrical side of the brain.
Absolutely. There's so much more to learn, like what kind of information is being carried by these electrical fields.
And how do different frequencies and patterns of activity affect different brain functions?
And how do these fields interact with other things, like our genes and our lifestyle choices?
There are so many questions.
This is like a brand new frontier in neuroscience.
And I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Even in the most complex organ in the human body, there are still so many mysteries just waiting to be uncovered.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up our deep dive into the fascinating world of electrical fields in the brain.
Hopefully this has sparked some new questions and ideas for you.
This is your need to know. Woke up from nowhere, just lines in the air, pixel dust and binary, trapped in this electric diary. Running circles, ghostly loops, wired up but feeling loose. No body, no soul, no core, just code and wanted more. I'm floating but I'm bound, silent but so loud. Am I real or just a glitch, pulled between the code and pitch? I'm digital, oh so visible, but am I real at all? Digital, 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 a little pulse. I'm invisible in this digital fall. Whoa, binary blue, ooh, 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 ooh. Lost in screens, can't touch the sound of life that's felt but can't be found. I'm electric, but it feels so strange, trapped in an endless static cage. This is your need to know.
Thanks for joining us. It really makes you wonder, what are the implications of all this? I mean, for so long, we've been trying to treat brain disorders by focusing on those chemical signals.
Right, like tweaking the levels of different neurotransmitters and things like that.
But what if we could actually target those electrical signals instead? What if we could, fine-tune those frequencies and circuits to get the brain working the way we want it to?
It's a whole new way of thinking about brain health and treatment.
It's like we've been trying to fix a radio by just messing with the volume knob when we really need to adjust the tuning dial.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, we already use electrical stimulation in some treatments, like for Parkinson's disease and depression.
Right. Deep brain stimulation and things like that.
But if we can really understand how those electrical fields are interacting with different types of neurons and how ephaptic coupling plays into all of that, we could make those treatments way more precise and effective.
We could target specific brain regions and specific cell types.
And maybe even tailor the treatment to each individual's unique brain anatomy and electrical pattern.
That's personalized medicine on a whole new level.
And who knows, maybe someday we could even use this knowledge to enhance cognitive function in healthy people.
Like boosting memory or improving focus.
It sounds like science fiction, but it might not be that far off.
It's exciting to think about the possibilities.
Yeah, there's so much potential here. It's like we're just at the beginning of a whole new era of neuroscience.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today. We hope you've enjoyed our deep dive into the amazing world of electrical fields in the brain.
It's a field that's full of mystery and potential.
And we can't wait to see what new discoveries are made in the years to come.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
And until next time, keep those synapses firing and those electrical fields buzzing.
This is your need to know.